This is the decision point with Anand Nanduri. Anand, oh man, our credibility was on the line with this Brandon Aiyuk, and they came through. They re-signed him. They extended him. Thankfully, I was all in on. There's no way Brandon Aiyuk is leaving a Super Bowl contender, and they replace him with Juwan Jennings. I did not see it. I didn't see how it was possible logically. And then there was a deal in place with Pittsburgh, and then we had to look at this deal in place and go, okay, well, that increases the probability, but I still got him going to the 49ers. Oh, God, we did it, dude. We called it.
Everyone should just be happy that this shit's over. That was just such an unnecessary, drama-filled saga for what, it's almost 3 months now, where, you know, he was definitely a Steeler, then he's not a Steeler, then he's, you know, potentially, you know, the Browns are opening up space, the Commanders are opening up space, you know, you've got Cortland Sutton involved with Denver and all kinds of craziness going on, but I'm very glad that we're done with that. And, you know, the discount on Brandon Aiyuk is now gone if you're drafting in, you know, seasonal leagues, best ball, whatever. So I hope you bought the dip while you could.
Nope. I have to correct you there. That's not how it works. The beauty of when this contract was signed is it was signed so late in the summer that all these ADPs and rankings are so affected by all the previous weeks of drafts. It's so difficult to completely recalibrate based on a new definitive truth that we have in front of us, that Brandon Aiyuk will be a 49er. We're not going to see him back in the early second round like we were. He was early second round at Underdog. That's where he was going. And he was a second round pick, period, in all fantasy leagues. And you're not going to find that. He was going fourth round in some leagues that I was in. It was a wild time, and I took the value. I even sidestepped a delicious Caleb Williams, DJ Moore stack that I was staring at because Brandon Aiyuk was just there, and I was like, I got to take this. I got to take the value on Brandon Aiyuk. And then I talked to John Paulson earlier this week, and he backed me up. He said that was the right move. Fuck the stack in that situation. Go Aiyuk. So he will likely move into the, say, third round, but he'll never get back. They can't get back. The ADPs are too sticky at this time of year. There's no way he can get back. Just for the same reason, there's no way McLaurin is ever going to go as high as he should. If we had the full summer to get Terry McLaurin juiced up into the third round where he belongs, that's where. So that if this Jahan Dotson move had been made a month earlier, it would equate to a full round of ADP difference by the end of August because of how sticky this ADP value is. It just doesn't correct the way a stock would correct after earnings.
Yeah. I think the funniest part about where Brandon was going is I think a part of it was the rumored destination. You know, if you're going from being in San Francisco's offense to being a Pittsburgh Steeler, in terms of the amount of targets you're actually going to get, in terms of how valuable those targets actually are, incredible that he's a Niner, in all honesty, because, I mean, it makes everyone, Purdy especially, man, what a bump for his value that is. But, you know, again, Debo started to creep up a little bit while all of that was happening. I think he's going to kind of sit where he is now.
That's the thing. Debo's going to stay where he is. Yeah. Debo's not going to fall back down probably where he belongs because Aiyuk is now on the team. That's the stickiness of ADP. And that's why Aiyuk and McLaurin, man. I have a couple of these expert leagues where I have Aiyuk and McLaurin because when you go Hero RB and you're going to draft Bijan, Saquon, Derrick Henry in the first two rounds, you got rat-a-tat-tat on wide receiver in round 3, 4, 5. It's just right there in front of you. It's so easy to do. Devontae Smith, Brandon Aiyuk, Terry McLaurin, and just keep going right back over the top, right out through Tank Dell. That whole tier through Tank Dell, Deontay Johnson, you're talking about players that either have explosive upside or are going to command 130 plus targets. It's a beautiful thing.
Mhm. And I mean, a lot of those guys are just so safe because of the amount of volume that they see.
So
That
safe.
it's not, you're not even worried necessarily about a floor. There are very, very risky picks in that range that have, you know, cripple your team floors. None of those guys do, barring injury. And, there's no one on earth that's predicting that. So get the injury finder, by the way. That'll help you out just a
The
little
injury
bit.
finder is out there. The injury finder, the breakout finder. The breakout finder is the probability that any given rookie will break out. The injury finder is the probability that any given player will miss multiple games with injury this year. And Brandon Aiyuk's just a phenomenal player. He's one of the rare, fully versatile players. Inside, outside, deep, intermediate, short, all the routes. He's one of those few guys. I mean, you can count him on, I say, maybe two hands. Need to count him. You got Jalen Waddle. You can go down the board. You, of course, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, the elite of the elites. And then you go in Aiyuk and McLaurin are in that rarefied air that they have the complete, full route inventory at their disposal. They're able to win in all quadrants against alpha corners. This is why other teams wanted Aiyuk. This is a rare skill set. Even the Steelers, they haven't seen quite that from George Pickens. George Pickens is not the target earner yet that Brandon
No.
Aiyuk has showed himself to be. Maybe he can be this year.
Yeah,
Maybe he can be.
That's what you hope. If you're Pittsburgh, that's what you're hoping. But Brandon's one of those true X receivers that not only can play the X as the X, which is difficult enough in and of itself.
Right.
But then from there, you can move him to the slot. You can move him all around. He's tremendously improved his blocking, which, I mean, Kyle benched him a few years back, if you remember, because of his blocking or because of his lack of blocking prowess, lack of effort in his blocking. And he's come a long way there too. If you look at what he's developed into as a player, this is exactly what you would hope to get out of a late first round wide receiver. A guy that in any given moment can go against someone's number one corner and win consistently and help your quarterback, especially if you have a young one, develop into what he can be so that eventually he can carry the load. At this point, Brandon Aiyuk is worth probably more than what San Fran's paying him at $30 million a year. But I just, there's not a better situation that Brandon possibly could have found because there may just not be a better situation in the league, period.
He had good counsel. They had him go through hell to extract a couple extra $1 million from the team he wanted to stay with all along. He's going to be much happier competing for a championship in a stable environment with a tight end and a wide receiver to complement him. It's hard to find a better complement for Brandon Aiyuk's skill set than a yak monster in Deebo Samuel and one of these seam riders, right? One of these seam demons in George Kittle. It's just perfect. And then there's nothing behind him. Like it's Juwan Jennings and the uber bust rookie.
The other fun part of it too is how easy is his life when, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3. A lot of these offenses just don't have a back that you can trust or a line that you can trust to go get you 3 yards. He didn't have to do all of the dirty work on 3rd and 4 and 3rd and 3 that a bunch of these other X receivers have to do. It's just such a perfect marriage for everyone involved. It's going to allow Brock Purdy to continue to be the value that he's been at QB. Christian's obviously going to carry a lot of the load for that, run game and pass game. But what Kittle, Aiyuk, Deebo do together, along with McCaffrey in the pass game, I don't think without Brandon that they would have been able to replicate that in any meaningful way because you do have to have someone that can win on the outside consistently. And without him, I mean, Niners fans remember the days where they were looking for that outside guy for years and years and years, and they threw pick after pick after pick, trying to find an outside X guy. Once you have them, don't let them go. They're very, very difficult to find. They're extremely difficult to replace. And that's why they're expensive as they are.
You need to draft Brandon Aiyuk in fantasy football. Okay? You have to draft him. There's no way that the offensive line and the defense can be as effective as they were. They've had a great run of luck, staying healthy, having players in their prime. Every NFL roster is fragile. And what you have, gunning for a championship one year can be a shell of itself the following year. Now, this isn't like the Bills. Like, the Bills have been decimated. The Bills have been ravaged, not just by injury, but just by, not being able to retain players and roster turnover. They're not the Bills, right?
No.
The Bills is going to be on Josh Allen's shoulders like it's never been this year. But I do think that the NFC West is going to be very competitive. There's going to be a lot of high-scoring games out west. And if the 49ers offensive line and defense are not elite, as they have been, then it's going to be more on Purdy. There's going to be more pass volume. There's going to be just more fantasy points accumulated specifically by Brandon Aiyuk, but also Debo, also Kittle. I like them all. And those of you drafting uber bust Ricky Pearsall in Dynasty, I would ask you, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think that the 49ers are now going to cut Debo Samuel next year? I mean, they have an out in the contract. They cut him in 2025. They're still absorbing $15 million of dead cap, and he only has a $24.2 million number, which is down from $28 million this year. So they're going to save $4 million plus inflation on Debo Samuel next year, unless he has some devastating injury or his effectiveness for some reason drops precipitously. I don't see them at age 28, age 29, walking away from Debo Samuel, especially if the team is competing for a championship again next year. They're going to bring him back. And now what are you looking at? This is the thing. This is the thing with a Ricky Pearsall. What are you expecting? Right? What are you expecting? Where do you think your hand is going to be? So you've been dealt this Ricky Pearsall hand. How do you think this hand's going to do a year from now? Is it going to improve dramatically? No. That's if he's not super ineffective, inefficient guy that goes out there like Jameson Williams and is getting one target a game.
Yeah,
right? That's if he's even remotely effective and earning targets when he's out there. There still isn't a near-term fantasy boon for Ricky Pearsall. You're talking about a guy that could help you maybe if he fires in 2026. You think they're going to get rid of George Kittle? Like what? I'm just trying to see where the targets are going to be funneled in from. Where is this target source for Ricky Pearsall? Again, assuming he's not Quentin Johnston, assuming he's not Jameson Williams, assuming he's not N'Keal Harry, assuming he's not Treylon Burks. I think he is those guys. I think he is just busterific, and then also going to be in a situation where he can never really earn the targets. And even if he's running clean routes and he's squeezing the football, he's going to lose snaps to Juwan Jennings because Juwan Jennings is a better blocker. This is the hellscape that you find yourself in, and this no-win situation you find yourself in when you keep drafting wide receivers in round 2 and round 3 of Dynasty rookie drafts. And you're like, how can I turn this into value? How can I turn this over and get more than I paid for this guy? It's such a narrow, thin thread that you have to follow. When my recommendation in Dynasty rookie drafts is always in those rounds, if you're staring at a Ricky Pearsall, get the hell out of there or draft a running back.
Your best case scenario for Pearsall is probably that Debo gets traded. That's your lifeline, so to speak. If it works out, that's your lifeline. Is if Debo gets moved, if someone wants to overpay for him, and that's the thing is Florida's entire offense. What Pearsall was in, they desperately needed him to carry their offense in the SEC, and I mean him and Mertz just couldn't do it. Florida wasn't very good last year. I think Pearsall as a player is really interesting. I think drafting him in round 1 was crazy. That we were all shocked by that. Yeah, that was.
I mean, well, I was more shocked by Xavier Legette. That's the thing, man. That's the thing. When you see a team go out and draft a Kadarius Toney, right? Dave Gettleman with Kadarius Toney makes perfect sense. Of course, he's going to be fascinated by Kadarius Toney trying to get his Percy Harvin. Right, we got to find our Tyreek. Actually, no, he didn't even say that. He said something even crazier. What he said was, "This is our Tyreek Hill." He wasn't even trying to hit on a Percy Harvin. I was like, at least the Percy Harvin makes sense. Both guys are from Florida. One guy was a running back, converted wide receiver, similar body type and build, athleticism. Makes sense. I get it. No. He's like, no, this is Tyreek Hill. And I'm like, oh, you're even more clueless than I thought. And I thought you were one of the most clueless GMs in the history of NFL football. No, you're even crazier. You've got Kadarius Toney, Tyreek Hill. So that's typically like the one late first rounder, Quentin Johnston the year prior, where it's like, okay, you're looking at the wrong details, NFL. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. This is a bad pick. And with Pearsall, you're so distracted by Legette as just a whiff that you're like, you forget that Pearsall also a giant whiff. Like it's like building up, and then Keon Coleman. And it's like, oh my God. It's like just 3 strikes and you're out. It's like me going up against a major league pitcher. That's when I see Legette, Pearsall, and Coleman back to back to back. And I know that the Golden Boy, the Harbaugh Golden Boy, is mixed in there, and I'm extracting Ladd McConkey and putting him in a completely different category of superstar studs. So we're going to put him in the superstar stud, top 3 receiver in the league.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We'll put him over here. But then all these other guys, bust. Just a bust city. And so you see this time and time. Even the thing is, even if these guys were really good with like 40% dominators in college, your early breakout ages, like Jordan Matthews at Vanderbilt looked the part, checked a lot of boxes. Like he was much closer to a Ladd McConkey than he is, some of these Pearsall and Legette types, like the sub producers that are getting drafted based on one spectacular catch or their combine workout or whatever it is. that would be these 3 busts in a row. It's not even that they have bad profiles. It's that if you get drafted in that area, and even if you are a quality prospect, things can just break against you. Mm-hmm. Like Jordan Matthews, his whole career, the knee injuries, the situation with Carson Wentz, the coaching carousel with Chip Kelly in Philadelphia. Even if you are teed up to thrive at the NFL level, the whole league can conspire against you.
Yeah.
Right? That's why most wide receivers bust. Even most wide receivers in the late first, early second, they bust. And then if you also say, well, this guy wasn't very productive in college, then it's like a keyhole you're trying to fit through.
It's the toughest part about what you just said is, first of all, never ever try to look for the next anything. There is no next Tyreek Hill. He's a one of one. Trying to find the next Tyreek Hill will get your GM and head coach fired. Do not try. There is one of him. There is only one of him. There will only ever be one of him. Do not try to find your Tyreek Hill. Do not try to find your Percy Harvin. Do not try to find your Andrew Luck or Patrick Mahomes or whatever archetype it is you're looking for. There's one Justin Jefferson. He's in Minnesota. There's one Jamar Chase. He's in Cincinnati. You can only scout what the college game gives you every year. And we got 2, potentially 3 with what I think Odunze could be in Harrison, Neighbors, and Odunze this year. We got 3 of them. You normally do not get 3 in one draft class that are true, that prototype is true number ones. If you're trying to draft a number 1 or number 2 receiver late in round 1, there are obvious reasons that they fall. You don't really find A-plus profiles of wide receivers that fall out of the top 10 or 12 simply because they're too valuable. You look at a Jamar Chase, you look at a Marvin Harrison Jr., all of those guys, it's very rare that you get a Justin Jefferson in the 20s. That doesn't happen.
Well, the draft that where this hit like across the board. The biggest hit by far, like just flopped the nuts in the late first, early second. Do you remember the draft year? You said it already. You said Justin Jefferson.
Oh, is it J. Jeff's year?
Yeah, it's 2020. Pick 17, CeeDee Lamb. Pick 17. This is outside the top 15. Yeah. This is an incredible gift. That's about where Kadarius Toney went.
Yeah.
You understand?
That's that. Yeah. Yeah.
Then Justin Jefferson at pick 22. The aforementioned Brandon Aiyuk at pick 25. Turns out to be a phenomenal pick in hindsight. Pick 33 was?
I don't remember.
T. Higgins.
T. Higgins, that's right.
The very next pick was Michael Pittman.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Yeah. Wow, man. And then in this zone of, let's say, pick 20 to 45, there were 2, we'll just say pick 46. There were 3 still, no matter what, we talked about this, whether it's Coleman and Leggett, Pearsall, there's always going to be 3 in this zone. You can, even in the nuts draft class, you can find 3 busts. Do you know who those 3 were in that draft class? In the chat, pause it. Everybody, pause it in the chat. Don't spoiler alert it in the chat. Just try to close your eyes. Okay, this is very difficult on YouTube, but you close your eyes, you open the comments, and you guess. You have to guess. This is a hard one. Without looking it up, this is real. I wouldn't have got this. I probably would have gotten 2 of the 3. I would have never gotten the 3rd.
It's 2020. So
2020 busts in the pick 20 to 50 zone.
Well, Jalen
Reagor, because he was again adjacent to, picked the slot before Justin Jefferson, one of the whiffs of Howie Roseman's career.
Was Terrace Marshall one of them?
I'll just tell you.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Laviska Shenault.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Laviska, baby. Laviska Shenault goes to, was it Jacksonville, I believe? Let me look it up.
Yeah.
I think it was it was Jacksonville Jaguars. And then the last one, this one I never would have got because this guy never did anything. KJ Hamler.
Oh, yeah.
KJ, because always, you got to remember, there's always a speed guy that gets overdrafted. There's always a John Ross, always a Paul Richardson, always a KJ Hamler. There's always Mecole Hardman. Every year in that slot, there's a speed guy that does 0, that is just air, total air. And then you had the Laviska Shenault, which was like a running back, wide receiver, hybrid yak guy. And that guy doesn't usually hit. Sometimes it does, like Debo. Mm-hmm. Like that Debo profile. The problem with the Debo profile is if you're on the Breakout Finder app and you're like, why does the Debo profile have, breakout at a low rate? It's just because that's a very difficult thing to do in the NFL. You have to be such an insanely epic tackle breaker. There's just like, it's a one of one every 10 years in the league. You're going to have a Debo. So trying to draft the next Debo, usually a recipe for failure. And then Reagor, this was my Big 12 receiver rule, that if you're going to take a guy from TCU who's just flashing big plays against weak competition, you just be careful. Just be careful. The bar for the TCU guy, who's also smaller, was crazy, over the LSU stud. And the only reason Jefferson even falls that far is because he's competing for targets with Jamar Chase and Terrace Marshall.
Yeah.
And Clyde Edwards-Helaire was that year. So that was interesting. So the Chiefs, they retain Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a 0. Clyde Edwards-Helaire should be in the CFL. He can't play. He adds nothing. He's not fast. This is what I always talk about. Small, slow satellite backs. Why? Why put them on the roster? Their absolute ceiling is Devin Singletary. Like, if you get the absolute maximum from your abilities as a small, slow satellite back, you will be Devin Singletary, and you'll earn a second contract. Motor got a second contract. It was like $8 million over 3 years. Something really. Whatever. He did it. He did it from like Florida International. You have to love this.
Mm-hmm. The thing that gets me most about the Debo thing, and the thing that nobody discusses, is like, oh, he's a wide receiver, running back kind of hybrid. No. All of those guys, the Percy Harvins of the world, were all fun. Kyle Shanahan had his running backs go down in a year. It might have been 2021. I can't remember what year it was. They had Debo Samuel running as a running back, basically running zone over and over and over again. Nobody else can do that. I'm sorry, Laviska Shenault was never going to do that. There is no next Debo Samuel. Please miss me with the idea that anyone should be compared to someone that can go out there, physically beat up press man corners, and also run zone. There's no one else that can do that. And if there is, he's already playing there, and his name's Christian McCaffrey. So please stop with the next Debo thing. I can't stand it. Every year someone's like, oh, he's run the ball before. He could be the next Debo. No, stop it. No, he can't. Foolishness. Back to KC. That's why I think it's so funny. A lot of these teams that are consistently good, you look at your Kansas City, you look at your Philadelphia, you look at your San Francisco, they will make massive mistakes in round one. Just huge, colossal. Jalen Reagor, Trey Lance. But then they'll come back and they'll find an Isaiah Pacheco, and you'll find a Brock Purdy.
They do it.
And so funnily enough, even though you've invested essentially a first and a seventh in these players, you're still getting the value back out of it that you would have wanted. And in a very, very strange roundabout way, they still get value out of those picks, which has always blown my mind. But the fact that you have, a Clyde Edwards-Helaire who showed so much promise in LSU's offense and then goes up a level and is basically a total 0. I mean, he was unplayable for large stretches of his rookie year.
Well, the first game of his career was his last playable game. He had like 20 plus fantasy points. Everyone was crazy about him. He vaulted. There were serious fantasy analysts putting him over Christian McCaffrey that year.
Whoa.
It was weird.
But yeah, I mean, now everybody's loves Carson Steele, undrafted free agent.
I drafted Deneric Prince. I feel like a sucker. It's always a bummer, especially if in best ball, if you have a player that you drafted who is not on the team, and haven't even figured out. Let me know in the chat. I haven't heard. Let me know one way or the other. Deneric Prince, he on the practice squad, or was he just outright cut? Because outright cut for a second-year player versus getting on the practice squad is a big difference, because they have a very thin running back room. It'll be easy for him to move up on the active roster if they put him on the active roster. I'm not sure. I'm looking at our depth charts right now, and where will Deneric Prince slot in? I don't know.
And this is the value to kind of understanding what players are versus projecting them as what they can be. I mean, we were over the moon about Isaiah Pacheco when he was drafted to Kansas City. You get this kid out of Rutgers that runs like the grass personally offended him. We love that. And I mean, he came in there and it was immediately visible to anyone that was around them and anybody that watched them play. He just added a dimension that Clyde Edwards-Helaire couldn't bring, no matter how much you wanted to love him, because he was a first-round pick and a national champion at LSU, and you had all this promise and hope that he would be this thing that he's clearly not. Whereas Pacheco was, kind of hidden away at Rutgers and late-round draft pick, and, we kind of see something special in this kid. And you and I came on here probably 2 or 3 years ago and pounded the table like, no, don't even bother with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Don't even bother trotting him out there. This kid's got it. And to kind of see what he's turned into has been awesome. And obviously Carson Steele making the team is so fucking cool. Like that, those are the kinds of stories. And it's why we love the preseason. It's why we watch the preseason, because it's not like you're getting A+ football by any means, but those stories are what make the preseason really cool. And so I was really happy for him to see him actually make the squad.
Okay, so per Aaron Wilson, at Aaron Wilson _NFL on Twitter X, the Chiefs have actually signed Imani Bailey to their practice squad. He's like a 5'7" running back who runs a 4.3, versatile, great on special teams. That's the thing. If you don't play on special teams and you're Deneric Prince, the chances you make the practice squad go down. So I fell for the Deneric Prince banana in the tailpipe. And I think that Deneric Prince belonged on this roster regardless. He has more developmental potential than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. It's just that these teams, they cannot walk away from first-round capital. They can't do it. So when you're in the front office and you're in that room making these decisions, the fact that it's not a full meritocracy, that the carryover, the stickiness of this draft capital would linger and allow a guy that doesn't even remotely deserve a roster spot to get locked in, another guy to get locked out in Deneric Prince. It's a bummer. It's a bummer. And it's the sport, right? If you don't have that early lead in the clubhouse with the draft capital, it's much harder to come back from the pack. And if you're Samaje Perine and you're proven and you have a great reputation around the league for things like ball security, pass blocking, all of those things, well, even if you get squeezed out on cut day or you're looking around going, I'm the odd man out in this backfield, you'll probably be okay. And that was the risk. That was always the risk, that Samaje Perine would land on some backfield. I mean, it was thought maybe it could be Cincinnati, right? I think the Chargers should have signed him, right? They should have signed him. They ended up, talking up Jarrett Patterson for a month, and then what do? They cut him. They cut him.
That's the business.
I want Samaje Perine late. I think Samaje Perine's an incredible pick late. He has an all-purpose skill set. He's not particularly explosive. He's not particularly exciting in any phase, but he's solid as a pass catcher. He's solid inside the 5-yard line. He's going to cannibalize touches from Isaiah Pacheco. And as we talked about earlier, the theme of the show is that ADPs are sticky. And even though these moves are being made that materially degrade or enhance a player's fantasy point projection, whether it be Brandon Aiyuk hitting best case scenario, or it be Isaiah Pacheco getting nerfed, it's not going to affect his ADP as much. The ADP is not going to fully correct. And so you're going to have people drafting Pacheco in the second round, and it's wrong. Yep. It's dead wrong. I'd rather have, if I'm drafting today, I would rather draft either of these wide receivers from San Francisco than Isaiah Pacheco.
Yeah, the thing about Perine is functionally his whole career, he's been less expensive, probably less wear. Joe Mixon. That's who he's been his entire career. I mean, it's not flashy.
They played together at Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean,
Mixon was the guy that couldn't pass block, and couldn't be trusted.
Yeah,
right. And Perine was the steady Eddie between the tackles and inside the 5, and even sometimes out of the backfield. He's the reason why Mixon was never a big producer in college, because Perine was like, hey man, for a college running back that's 235 pounds, he could move. Yeah. Samaje Perine at Oklahoma, look out. Go check the tape. Samaje Perine at Oklahoma.
Pretty sure he had a 400-yard game. Like
It's
so,
insane.
like a 300 or 400 yard game, yeah. But all these running backs, especially, the running back era of 10, 15 years ago is dead. There aren't bell cows in the league really anymore. There aren't guys that you outside the top 5 or 6, there just aren't guys that you can reliably count on to get you 25 touches a week. And so when you look at wide receiver profiles, and you look at a guy like Aiyuk that's probably going to get 12 to 15 targets, I mean, those are probably worth more than, 16 touches for Isaiah Pacheco, as much as that sucks to say because we love the player. I'm with you. And in that spot, I'm drafting Aiyuk over Isaiah Pacheco, but love both players.
But 2 rounds difference before
Mm-hmm.
these moves were made. So there are a couple teams that have invested just nothing. I mean, no money, no capital, no nothing. You get the Chargers, nothing, right? Just Ravens retreads and a 6th-round pick. Cowboys, same thing, retreads and a 6th-round pick. Bengals, same thing. Giants, same thing. Same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Day 3 pick, Tyrone Tracy, Chase Brown, right? These are exciting players. These are satellite backs with juice, and they bring in a trusted between the tackles player. It just so happens with Devin Singletary, he's one of these Samaje Perine types, but he's smaller. But because he plays much bigger than he actually is, he gets deployed as you would deploy a Zach Moss, as you would deploy a Samaje Perine. It's interesting. It's very cool. Like I said, very cool what Devin Singletary has done with his career. And you have these teams now that's all they're willing to invest in the running back position.
My question is, why would you invest more? Like, when you look at it, right?
What about Baltimore? You have to think that if there is a match team to player where you could say our system, our team, this player, this year, like a particular player in a particular season on a particular team with a particular supporting cast, you would have to think that money well spent would be Derrick Henry.
Yeah. Yeah. I there's no better. I mean, as soon as it was clear that he wasn't going to be a Titan, that was everyone's dream, right? Is it's like, okay, he's a Raven. This has to work out because now you have the giant bowling ball that is Derrick Henry. You don't want to tackle him 30 times a game. But if you lose contain for a quarter second, Lamar's going for 80. So good luck. Good luck to every defensive coordinators at night, linebackers, Godspeed. Good luck to y'all, man. I don't know what the hell I would do. Because, I mean, you've got thunder and lightning in a big way. I mean, don't forget, Derrick Henry's capable of ripping off 99 on his own, too. So,
but that's the thing. I
he's
think
not
that
slow.
these running backs, like a Saquon, like a Derrick Henry, they should only be signed after their rookie contract is up for 1-year deals. But
Yeah.
The thing is, the Giants, they got in a situation where they really wanted to get something back for Saquon Barkley, and they just couldn't make it work. And they certainly wouldn't have done a deal with Philadelphia, but they weren't willing to franchise him. But I also think in watching the Hard Knocks episode that they did the right thing, that they let him go. They said, hey, we franchise tag you 1 year. We are 50-50 whether we even want you back from a roster construction standpoint. So we know probably the better business decision would be to franchise tag you and try to trade you, but we are going to do what's right. And I think that that'll pay dividends down the road, more likely to induce more players to extend their contract with you and sign with you if you treat Saquon Barkley well. Mm-hmm. Right? If you treat people like human beings and you don't necessarily leverage the collective bargaining agreement to extract the absolute maximum value from every player at all times, I think that in the long run can help you. And so that's good for their reputation as a front office. And then also what happened is they ended up inadvertently coaxing the Eagles into overpaying so they could stick it to a division rival. And so it ended up being a genius move. It ended up working out. You're like, okay, we have Devin Singletary for $8 million. You're paying $36 million to Saquon Barkley. I think we get the better deal here.
Yeah, I mean, they're not competing for anything in New York this year either, right? Philly is trying to open what they think, or at least keep open what they think is a championship window. After, I mean, they were 10-1 last year after 11 weeks, and we saw the wheels fall off of this team. And, you know, whether it was Brian Johnson's scheme, whether it was, you know, whatever happened in Philadelphia last year, which we can go into for an hour right now, they figured we'll just bring in potentially the most stable running back that we can find. I mean, it's 3rd and 2. Saquon Barkley's going to get you 2 yards. You know, we don't have to put our quarterback in harm's way.
Or 60.
Yeah, or 60. We don't have to put our quarterback in harm's way anymore.
That's what's great about Saquon. I think it was
great.
It was fine. I still think that was an overpay. That's not what running backs were getting 5 years ago. Elite running backs like Saquon Barkley were making much more than that, and it's only going to keep going down. And I think the 3-year deal is going to be few and far between for running backs. I mean, Saquon Barkley, remember, he was like the 2nd pick in the draft, still in his prime. I think the vast majority of these running back deals you're going to see are going to be 2 years, $10 million. I think that's just going to be what these guys command. Slowly, that's just going to be the standard over time, because we've never seen this many teams just investing absolute zero into the position. And there's an interesting set of developments that's happening in Dallas with how they're planning to deploy Rico Dowdle based on, you know, just a complete lack of investment in the position. And we are going to get into it after this. Oh, it's the Podfather, and last year's fastest growing fantasy platform is back. It's SmashUp Fantasy. They've got these leagues where you redraft your team every week and you get smarter as the season progresses. Now, SmashUp also has a patented power-up card. These are actual cards that can boost your individual players or your entire team. So if you think Lamar Jackson's going to run wild all over the Kansas City Chiefs in Week 1, play the Scramble Spikes SmashUp card to turbocharge his rushing points. And that's not all. SmashUp also is introducing the world's first single-player fantasy game. Think Street Fighter meets fantasy football, where you can go toe-to-toe versus an increasingly difficult fantasy football boss and qualify for the postseason tournament of champions. So test your skills against me, the Podfather, and the PlayerProfiler Team today at smashupsports.com and use code PlayerProfiler. The code is PlayerProfiler to get special perks like extra lineups for these weekly tournaments and so much more. And it's all free at smashupsports.com. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Rico Dowdle. They don't want him doing anything because they want to keep him fresh for the season. This is very good news. I know that Zeke's going to go out and he's going to get 12 carries. But the value touches, the high value touches on a team that is going to be gunning for 40 points a week, the high value touches going to Rico Dowdle. Rico Dowdle is a better running back, a better all-around running back than a guy like Chase Brown, than almost any other running back that you can find in that zone, in that range of picks in a fantasy draft. I wish I had more. That's one of my big regrets. So I had to pick one regret from this summer. It would be not getting enough Rico Dowdle.
Yeah. I mean, in the price, as information like that comes out, right? Anybody that drafted him, especially in, you know, like an underdog best ball or any format where, you know, upside is what you're chasing, man, that's got to feel so good. I mean, he's going to have a few of those spike weeks where you're like, shit.
I mean, this is a legitimate question for the chat. This is a legitimate question. Put this in the chat. Put this in the comments. If you're watching this post live, put it in the comments. Put it in the chat. Rico Dowdle, who has a 128.1, 89th percentile burst score on Player Profiler, runs a 4.5 flat at 215 pounds, so he has the size. He has the athleticism. He has the pass catching ability. He had lost seasons due to just a freak lower body injury cost him a whole year where they really needed him. Right? He only had 89 rush attempts last year, but in those 89 rush attempts, he also had 17 receptions during that same period. So I like what he can do as a receiver, and I think he's very interesting. And what is the probability, everyone, that Rico Dowdle outscores Kyren Williams this year? Because I look at these two players and I'm like, well, okay, one guy was a 6th round pick, one guy was undrafted, one guy's actually explosive, the other guy's not, one guy's got, workhorse size, the other guy doesn't. Right? Just you have one guy that has done it before. He had an efficient, productive season last year. Rico Dowdle has yet to have that. But we're projecting based on his probable role that he will have something, or at least games where things play out similar to how they played out last year for Kyren Williams. Like, what is the probability? I think it's pretty high, actually.
I think you could see a Rico Dowdle game where he has 7 or 8 catches, a couple touchdowns, and I think that's potential, top 3, top 4 running back finish for the week.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a ton of touches in an offense as explosive as Dallas's for you to return value. It's not like we're subjecting him to the Pittsburgh Steelers offense where Najee Harris needed, 22 carries to return, 14 fantasy points for you. It's not that kind of gig that Rico is being asked to hold the mantle in for Dallas. And the other thing too is he's not going to get those I don't want to say meaningless, but like 3rd and 4, they're going to run Ezekiel Elliott. And it's just going to be, will Zeke steal the goal line stuff is the major concern, but Rico's probably going to be out there in any passing goal line situation. So, as much as upside is capped in terms of pure running back, you're not drafting him as some bell cow in round 4 and hoping that he carries your roster. He's just basically a late round flyer that's there. And if Zeke gets hurt for a bit and he's got to shoulder a little bit more of the load, obviously he's a very valuable fantasy asset at that point. But I think he can be valuable independent of that too, just because the touches that he's going to get are in such a high-powered offense that will score so many points that it almost doesn't matter how good Rico himself is. Those touches are valuable. The same thing last year with Kyren Williams, right? It wasn't necessarily about how great Kyren Williams is. It's not about
the case for Kyren Williams in the 3rd round, now 4th round, after the punt return news. Well, it's the same as the case for Rico Dowdle. Like, there's nothing. Hey, this is the role this guy has in this offense. You need to buy him. You can project the touches based on the role. Are you scared of Ezekiel Elliott?
No.
Rediscovering himself as a true bell cow, a proper RB1? No. I'm a hell of a lot more scared of Blake Corum becoming that than I am Ezekiel Elliott. Yeah, I think the Cowboys are going to have a higher scoring offense than the Rams. So why is this even like this? This is like a conversation. This just goes to show that Kyren Williams should have been a 7th round pick all along, and that Rico Dowdle should have been about a 7th or 8th round pick all along. They were polarized. One guy was going in the double-digit rounds because we haven't seen it yet, and he's undrafted. And the other guy, because we saw it one time in a small sample, not a full season, he goes 2nd round. And now that things are deteriorating around him and the news is bad that he's going to be a punt returner, okay, now he's a 4th rounder. Still way too high.
It's because we've seen it before. It's confirmation bias. You know exactly what this is, Matt. This is
just the weirdest thing.
This is no news to you, man. Like,
it is news because every year I look up and there's so many super savvy decisions that are made in draft after draft after draft, and then all these drafts, they aggregate into an ADP. And I'm like, wow, these ADPs are really efficient. Wow, these ADPs are really nailed. And then I see this Kyren Williams ADP, and I'm like, this just sets us back years, people. What are you doing? I
love
thought
Kyren.
we had this figured out. Didn't we all meet and agree? I was at the FF Expo. I didn't meet a single analyst that was drafting Kyren Williams. I'm like, who are these people? Who are these mystery bidders on Kyren Williams? It doesn't make any sense. And then the news starts to leak out. Oh, this guy's going to be returning punts. Oh, maybe he's actually in a worse situation than Rico Dowdle.
Yeah. If you're having a Rams running back is valuable because the offense is good. Having a Cowboys running back is valuable because the offense is good. Rico is basically, you get a discount on him because he hasn't done it before. As soon as he does it, that discount is going to be gone forever. Because there are always going to be the truthers, right? There's someone is going to 2 years from now be like, hey, Kyren had the 1 year, 2023, Kyren Williams, he could do it again because we saw him do it once.
If I say the name Justin Forsett, does that trigger you in any way? Do you remember who this player is?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Well, then, I think that's my comp. That's the comp I'm going to go down with is Kyren Williams as Justin Forsett.
It's not a bad one, actually. Now that I think of it, that's not a bad one. No, it's
same size, same athletic profile. I mean, these guys are same. They're same. And what you have to remember is Forsett was being drafted because of his coach. This was Mark Trestman. This was Mark Trestman who fixed Jay Cutler. This was the Mark Trestman offense. Up tempo, throws to the running back like crazy, and he was the Sean McVay of that particular year. So,
yeah, but no one's Matt Forte. So,
oh yeah, Matt Forte. That's a good running back.
Yeah,
so very that's the difference between the good running back and a Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams will never be anything close to Matt Forte. But he was being drafted at a Matt Forte level ADP for months and months and months this year, and it made no fucking sense, man. It made no sense. And I am the one. I am the one who is not only allowed but obligated to victory lap on this. I'm just victory lapping on, I know. Training camp and preseason news is lame. I know. But of anyone who's allowed to do this, it is me because I've been so adamant that he can't be drafted. He cannot be drafted. Fighting with people on Twitter, on the show, about this Kyren Williams business. And then I get this text from Theo, and he's like, have you seen the news? And I'm like, what news? I was at soccer practice or whatever. And he's like, Kyren Williams is returning punts. And he just gave me like a series of just laughing, crying emojis. And it was like, this feels good, man. This feels good. Yeah. This feels good. I'm allowed to do this, and I'm obligated. This is what the people want. The people want Kyren Williams as a punt returner, victory laps.
Well, just wait until that first Blake Corum RB1 week. You're going to be insufferable.
Oh, Blake Corum, man. I don't have enough Blake Corum. I have 80% Corum, and it's not enough.
Oh, okay.
It hasn't been enough. 0 Kyren, 80% Corum, because I'm in some of these drafts where people they snipe me. They know I'm in there, and they're like, I'm gonna jump up. Someone heard, my buddy Will heard that at Fantasy Spin, he heard on the podcast that I was gonna go up a round to get Corum, so he went up 2 rounds. So I was like, okay, well, that's cool, man. That's a pretty cool move. It was a high stakes league. It was live at the FSGA. I was like, that's cool, man. That's pretty cool. So, and then Scott Hudson is saying, oh, he returned punts last year. Yeah, but that's not what happens. You see, if you are returning punts, they pull you off punt return duty if they need you to be a bell cow. They're not going to ask you to do both. And then if you establish yourself as the workhorse back, as the RB1, they're not going to ask you to punt return. That's just not a thing that happens. So it is bad. It is absolutely actionable news. There's very little actionable news that comes out. That is absolutely one of those things And we're also getting the news that Rashee Rice likely not to be suspended. Shocking! Shocking!
I'm sure Drew Davenport's having himself a day.
I mean, we came on this program multiple times saying there's no way he gets suspended this year. How could they? Explain to me how he gets suspended this year, given the precedent that's been set. It's not happening. Explain to me how Brandon Aiyuk ends up anywhere but San Francisco. What? How? Yes. Thank you.
It definitely adds intrigue to that Thursday night opener. You know, it's I think when you look at anything is an improvement over the weapons that Pat had last year. Let's be totally real here. But when you add a Xavier Worthy, Rice comes back year 2. You know, they added back Juju Smith-Schuster, which, you know, you and I look at and we're like, whatever. But NFL folks really, really like him for the role that he's going to play, which is basically, you know, your wide receiver 3, your 3rd and 4 guy. Travis Kelce's obviously still there. We love Pacheco. Carson Steele will be there. P. Ryan. That offense is going to look a little bit different than it did last year. And I think hopefully in a good way, because a lot of that playoff run was just Pat willing them down the field for drives. And, you know, they capped off that Super Bowl win with, you know, an overtime drive for the ages. I thought, you know, it's Pat being Pat. There's no one else like him. There will never be another like him. But I'm super excited to see what Baltimore comes out with on Thursday night, because the Chiefs came into your house. You had the 1 seed in the AFC last year. You had the 1 seed. They dared you to run the ball, and instead you dropped back, 35 or 40 times at home in a game that you lost, I think was 17-10. It's not like it was some barn burner where you had to score 45 points to keep up. I'm very interested to see if they decide to abandon the running again. But that's one of my favorite games of the year on opening night. So thank you, NFL, for giving us that early. I will be there. If you see me, come say hey. And download Fast Draft.
Oh, you're gonna be. Oh, you're downloading. Was that? Let's see that T-shirt. You were in the Fast Draft T-shirt. Oh, look at the Fast Draft T-shirt.
Doing big things over here.
We crossed the 1,000 user threshold. So 1,000 users in less than a month. That's thanks to everyone in the audience. I know a lot of you have gone out and downloaded Fast Draft, Google Play, the App Store. It's a popular game. The Flex 4 tournament is almost at 50% filled, as is the Origins tournament, which is all rookies. So if you're a Dynasty person, the all-rookie game, Origins, is going to be fun. And if you're just a more of a traditional fantasy gamer, then you're going to love the Flex 4 game. I know that you've been playing both and enjoying them. And we've got, 4 for 4, writing an article on Fast Draft strategy that was just surreal to see. I'm seeing some super high-profile people in there. Dwayne McFarlane from Fantasy Life, people playing, and I'm like, oh, this is surreal. So it's been a goosebumps moment, many goosebumps moments coming from Fast Draft. And if anyone that's listening to Decision Point, wants to get a triple deposit bonus, so go ahead and put the code in there. There's a little promo code in there. Just put in this decision, and then email me. Don't forget to email me, podfather@rotowonderworld.com. Also email me to make sure that goes through. But yeah, we're gonna hook up this audience. This audience has been super loyal to you and me for many years. I get a lot of emails and DMs from people saying, "Hey, this is my favorite show on the network." So there's ways we can hook people up, and as a thank you for that. Jamar Chase also not practicing throughout preseason training camp. He's been holding in. He's been holding towels. He's been distributing socks. He's been doing a great job. I think he's a real team player. I've always respected the hell out of Jamar Chase. There's no discount on drafting him, just like there was no discount on CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb got the inevitable contract, and then the ADP adjusts as it should. I was seeing Tyreek Hill getting drafted over CeeDee Lamb, and then the reason is, oh, well, there's this uncertainty with a contract. I'm like, get out of here, man. What are we doing? So that's not happening with Jamar Chase. Everyone knows he's going to be there. They franchise tag T. Higgins. We talked about this, that it's really difficult to see this particular team extending Burrow, Chase, and Higgins. It's very difficult to see. They are going to extend Jamar Chase. When is that going to happen? And what will become of T. Higgins?
Yeah, so basically Cincinnati, other than quarterback, does not extend before your last year of your contract. So Jamar Chase being a first-round pick, 4 years, and then, the +1 at the end. So at the end of this upcoming season is when I expect Cincinnati to extend him. Now, he's doing everything in his power to kind of make that process go faster and have them do it this year. I don't think they will. That market is set. There's not really – no receiver is going to come into the league and kind of eclipse what Justin Jefferson has made. We saw that with the Aiyuk deal. We saw that with the CD deal. Jamar Chase will make more, I think, than Justin Jefferson, but nobody is in the realm at the moment that would spike that price higher for Cincinnati, so they have no real incentive to get it done now. He's under contract. This is not a Le'Veon Bell situation. Someone hit me up about that yesterday. They asked, how is this different than the Lev Bell situation? Why is Jamar going to play when Le'Veon Bell didn't? Well, Le'Veon Bell was franchised twice and just held out through the second franchise tag and said, I'm not going to sign it. Whereas Jamar Chase is under contract. They're very different for that reason. And I think, he will be there. He will be playing. I think Higgins long-term probably gets moved. I doubt that it will be in a sign and trade. I think it's going to be true free agency at the end of this year. They'll try to do right by him and let him go, find the spot that's next for him. But, it's funny because, being in Chicago in a major city, when players come into town, especially, preseason or bye week, 2 weeks ago, I was out with some buddies in West Loop at Bodega. There's a club over there, and Jamar Chase walks in. And so we're sitting, we're right next to him and his buddies in the section that they had, and, just said hey to him. What's up? And, he seems to be in good spirits and is ready to go. He will be out there week 1. I have no doubt. But, doesn't look like he's been slacking in the gym or anything. So no. You'll have your full out-of-the-box wide receiver 1 ready to go, Cincinnati. No worries.
What was he drinking?
I did not ask. I think there was a bottle of vodka. There were too many women around him.
I'm going to guess ice water.
Sure.
I think he might have been drinking ice water and women. I think that's what he was drinking. That's good always I like that for athletes. I think that's what they should be doing. And in fact, there's a lot of rock stars that are now wishing that that's how they rolled in their younger years.
Yeah,
I love him. I think it's gonna be great. I think it's going to be a big year for Burrow. Again, this is the signal. The Cowboys are sending this signal. The Bengals are sending this signal. We're just going to be throw. Like, we're not investing in the running back position. That means we're going to throw more. That's why I like Dak. That's why I like Burrow. It's why I like Chase. Even Yoshivos, right? They got some things riding on Yoshivos. They got to see development from Burton. There's ways that the Bengals can get more comfortable. They got Charlie Football.
Mm-hmm.
There's ways they can get more comfortable. Trenton Irwin. There's ways they can get more comfortable letting T. Higgins walk. I think nothing would be better for them than Yoshivo stepping up and having some spike weeks. Yeah. That would be really – I don't think that's going to happen with Burton this year. I think Burton's going to be strictly developmental, and they're going to watch him and say, okay, yeah, maybe year 2 this could really happen. And – they're going to do right by Higgins and let him walk.
Yep.
Right.
And
that's the thing. Look at what these teams are doing. The Giants doing right by Saquon Barkley. This is a less cutthroat league than it used to be. If you're betting on cutthroat, you're probably going to be wrong. Now, the irony there is the collective bargaining agreement is more cutthroat than it's ever been. Yeah, the whole reason this is possible is because the power dynamics have skewed so much for so many collective bargaining agreements that have been signed in a row that just buried the players.
Yeah.
Like you sign 3 bad collective bargaining agreements in a row, You're going to be bargained right off the table, and you're not going to have the luxury of holding out. He's going to be fined in the tens of thousands of dollars every week. He's not going to, you'll go bankrupt holding out in today's NFL. It's just not possible. That's why they're holding in. That's why they've dropped the whole facade, the whole charade. They're just like, I'm going to show up. I'm going to give out towels. This is going to happen. We all know that we're on a collision course. Let's just do it. Same thing with CeeDee Lamb in Dallas. I'm just going to be here. Even if my agent tells me that it's in my best interest to disappear, and that'll add a little more pressure on the team. No, let's just drop it. Let's drop the pretense. You guys are signing me. I'm here. I'm a team player. I love that. Anytime you see a guy like a Jamar Chase with his ability and his history of production in college, like 1,800 yards, something crazy, right? It basically had more yards in one season than Ricky Pearsall, Keon Coleman, and Xavier Legette in their whole college careers.
Yep.
So when you see that guy go run the agility drills at the combine, you're like, you're cool. You're cool. When you see that guy giving out towels at practice, holding in, you're like, you're cool.
Yeah.
You're cool. Like no pretense, no pretension, no managing the process. Right? No, we signed a deal for my jersey to be licensed, but my dad signed it instead, and now it's null and void, and now we're in court, against fanatics. Right?
Do not mess. Rule number 1: do not mess with Marvin Harrison Sr. If you don't know,
they are. Well, actually, here's the thing: as confident in their ability as a family to just do whatever the fuck they want, they ran into a guy in Fanatics was like, no. Fanatics has the people at Fanatics are hardcore business people. I mean, think about it. There's this absolute treasure trove, this cash trove of merchandise that the NFL is sitting on, merchandise sales. Mm-hmm. And Fanatics is like, actually, NFL, we've got a deal that you can't refuse. Let us do it all. Let us do all the merchandise. We got this. And they said yes. They said yes. Those people. The people at Fanatics are killers, man.
Not just
they're
the
business
NFL,
killers.
The MLB's in there too. Like,
it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I would not mess with them. That's just
Michael Rubin.
Mike Rubin's
Michael Rubin has an ego.
Oh yeah.
Okay, you're not gonna try to pull one on Michael Rubin. He is not. He is going to take you to court. He's gonna stand up. He's not just gonna be like, listen, I don't want to rock the boat here. Michael Rubin's gonna rock the boat.
Yeah, that's what he does.
He has no problem. This is the wrong guy. You try to do a little signature, allegedly, a little signature switcheroo, and Michael Rubin's like, actually, guys, can we just stop? Right? So I think if Fanatics was around, there wouldn't have been like the Barry Bond jerseys without the nameplate. Remember all those days?
Oh yeah.
Remember those days? I don't think that would have happened. I think with Fanatics, it's like everybody, they are lining it up. It's kind of like Nike. I think about Nike where they just had everybody in lockstep. That's now what's going on with Fanatics, and that's just you have to just tip your cap, right? You have to tip your cap. These are aggressive business people that are take no prisoners, and that's sports business, man. Michael Rubin, I mean, the guy is making money.
Oh yeah, he's
say what money you want, but on the income, the money coming in, the money scoreboard, Michael Rubin's winning.
Oh yeah, always will be too. I mean, Fanatics, especially the contracts that they have. Baseball folks are very upset about what their jerseys look like at the moment, but overall, I mean, the fact that they're they basically own distribution for the NFL and the MLB is just crazy. I cannot even imagine the amount of cash that's coming in from those two deals. It's just nuts.
It's the relationships, it's the sort of the core business build out, the scale, the investor network. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's like that is impressive.
Yeah.
As someone who is building multiple businesses in the space in sports, it's not that easy, man. It's not that easy. So that's why I'm like, all right, that's pretty cool. I'm glad you're standing up. And Marvin Harrison, as a fantasy option, I am continuing to ring the bell, the warning bell. It's like, this doesn't smell right, right? It doesn't smell right. To draft him as if he's Jamar Chase isn't right. He's not going to hold in when the time comes. He's not going to be giving out towels. He didn't run the agility drills. He didn't even run the 40! He didn't even talk. He just was like Marshawn Lynch, right? He was just like, I'm just here to think about the 2024 season.
Yeah.
I'm just focused on the 2024 season. Next question. I'm just focused on the 2024 season. Next question. I'm just focused on the 2024 season. Next question. Hey, you going to run the 40? Nope. Hey, you going to get on the scale? Nope.
If you're that level of player, right? Jamar, Marv, any of those guys, my question has always been, why even go? Like, what do you have to gain?
I don't know. But what I also don't know is that,
I mean, it sucks for us because I would love
of
to
these
see
players have been injured. Is that they're worried about getting injured? Like,
I don't think it's
they're worried about disappointing the scouts running a 4.62 and then.
I don't think it's that either, Matt. I think it's basically saying, look, my tape tells the full story. You have all my catapult data. You know exactly how fast I run. So why do you need me to put on shorts and give you something to critique when what you're evaluating me on is my prowess as a football player, which you've seen? And now you're asking me to do things that aren't tangentially related to football. But when are you ever sprinting 40 yards by yourself? We love the 40-yard dash. It's fun for all of us. It was awesome to see Xavier Worthy break that record. There's so much stuff that's fun about the combine.
Yes.
But does the 40-yard dash directly translate to how good a football player you are? Because, yeah, there are thresholds.
Yeah, it does. It's a lot better a measure than anything from Catapult. Because there's significant correlation with all these things. There's correlation. There's a lot less correlation with something like the explosiveness drills than there is the 40 time, but there's absolutely correlation with all of these things.
Right.
And if you are Jamar Chase and you're wired in that way, you deserve to be like the number 1 pick overall. You deserve to be a top 5 pick. If the NFL really wants to continue to make the combine a big event and a big draw, and it's a super important island on the calendar, a content island on the calendar where people can swim to, all of us NFL analysts can swim to, and we have something to talk about for like a 2-month stretch. This is the thing we talk about till the draft, is what happened at the combine. Mm-hmm. Then you gotta tell these teams, you gotta somehow get them in line and say, you're not allowed to draft a guy like Marvin Harrison in the top 5 over a guy like Malik Neighbors, over a guy like Romeo Odunze, who are going through the whole process and they're doing things the right way. You can't reward this behavior. You can't do it, man.
There just aren't many people that have. So Marv's situation was unique, I think, partially because of who his dad is, but I also think because of what he was as a prospect. You can't do that. You can't get away with doing that if you're not an A+++ prospect. If you're have a mid-round 1 grade, you can't really get away with doing that. So it's a very unique case. I doubt we'll ever see it replicated, but it is, that side of it is what it is. And I don't know that drafting him where he's going right now as a rookie makes much sense to me, mainly because it's you're banking on Kyler's health, which has always been a question.
It's a mistake.
Two, you're hoping that Arizona gets their shit together and is scoring 20 to 30 points a game, 25 to 30 points a game, which they very well could. I mean, when Kyler came back at the end of last year, the offense looked a lot better. But what is a successful season drafting Marvin Harrison Jr. at wide receiver 10? 1,200
Michael
yards
Wilson
and
has
8
looked
touchdowns?
awesome.
Like what is your bottom line bar for success at wide receiver? What is it currently, 9 or 10?
Yeah. The upside on Marvin Harrison is extreme. I agree with that.
But it's not this year.
If things break his way, then it's league winning stuff.
Yeah,
but I think the probability of him hitting his upside is much lower than most fantasy analysts believe. So my opinion of it is it's a much lower probability, number one. But then there's the other side of the coin, which is the downside coin. The downside is he's not a top 5 receiver, that he's a total bust, and that we look up and we're like, how did we not see this? How did we get tricked? Right? There's been huge seasons people have had at Ohio State, like Jameson Williams, and then they just did not translate to the NFL. And it would be a lot easier to feel comfortable about a high floor if the guy participated during the process, but he went out of his way to spite the process at every turn. And the only news that we have about him, it isn't positive news from training camp. It's been flat. The sort of the EKG of his training camp has been pretty flatlined. And now there's news that his family's being sued by Fanatics. A guy that's worth, by the way, Michael Rubin, worth $11 billion.
Well, the thing is, no one's going to care if he shows up and scores touchdowns, which he will do. But I think the market price that's being asked to buy into immediate wide receiver 1 status in fantasy, I think he's going to be a much better wide receiver in real life in year 1 than he will be a fantasy wide receiver.
Totally.
And I think the thing is, he will drastically change life in Arizona because that's what they've needed so badly since DeAndre Hopkins left. My biggest question is, even if he has a very successful season, right? 1,100 yards, 6-7 touchdowns. That's a really, really good rookie year for anybody. That's still falling short of expectations.
Of course. The guy can't pay off. I mean, again, the probability he pays off at ADP is so thin.
I mean,
it's
you're looking at like a
play. If you want a projection on a high up-tempo, high-volume offense, then I give you Drake London. Right? That's a better pick, right? We're already doing this with Garrett Wilson, the projection. Let's do it with Drake London. At least Drake London has the experience. At least Drake London has efficiency that we can look back at. Like, he also skipped a lot of the process because he was injured, not because he opted out. But now we've seen, okay, this guy is a serious target earner. When you look at his target share numbers the last couple of years, look at his air yard share, you look at his yards per route run. These are good numbers. Okay, his efficiency, his advanced efficiency numbers on Player Profiler, good. I'm much more comfortable with the top 10 pick in the NFL draft projecting a Drake London than I am a Marvin Harrison. And while the upside is similar from Malik Neighbors, the floor is a lot higher for Malik Neighbors. The upside is higher with Jalen Waddle. And we've seen the floor for Jalen Waddle. The floor is, right at that wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 cutoff. He can get there in all kinds of different ways. So whether it's Olave, Waddle, London, Neighbors, there's so many wide receivers I'm much more comfortable with than Marvin Harrison. It's just
if I'm starting a team, I would rather have Marv than all of them. But that's when you're drafting a player for fantasy, the range of outcomes that you have for Marv here. 1, Kyler's health is totally tied to what he's going to be. 2, more importantly, will they throw enough? We know, there are offenses that we know. If you're Pat Mahomes, tight end 1 or wide receiver 1, you're going to get the ball. You're going to get the ball a lot.
Good point. It's a good point. There's a reason why I'm not drafting a significant Colts receivers.
Yeah, they're not going to throw enough.
Right.
Like,
Think about where Zay Flowers
love...
is. Zay Flowers has a mobile quarterback. They're gonna be bottom 5 in pass volume this year.
Yeah.
And because of the running that Lamar Jackson's going to be doing, that's going to be a big part of it. And of course, the handing off to Derrick Henry. But Zay Flowers exceeded all expectations last year.
Mm-hmm.
It would be incredibly difficult for Marvin Harrison to command more targets than Zay Flowers.
Yeah.
In 2024. And look where Zay Flowers is being drafted. He's a 5th, 6th round pick. Sometimes now 4th round, people that know things. But that's the zone where Marvin Harrison should go. So I think the wide receiver that I think has the most broken ADP is absolutely Marvin Harrison. I've never understood his ADP. It's been just bizarre. And I'm even looking at it, and he even, like I said, goes ahead of London. And I'm like, okay, well, no, because that's ridiculous. Because London is a projection, but there's a lot more information that we have about London on a similar offense, where London is actually, not only is that offense going to be similar in terms of high scoring, there's going to be more pass attempts in Atlanta than there is in Arizona. So you make a great point that there are going to be, these rush attempts will pull pass volume out of that Arizona offense. And that's before we talk about Michael Wilson and Trey McBride and the guy no one wants to talk about, Greg Dortch. No one, even Atlanta doesn't have a Greg Dortch, right? Michael Wilson, better than Darnell Mooney, okay? Greg Dortch, better than whoever is they don't even have a number 3 wide receiver in Atlanta. And Trey McBride's getting drafted ahead of Kyle Pitts right now.
Yeah,
explain this math to me. Explain this. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Okay, so I thought the wide receiver whose ADP made the least sense was Nico Collins, because the target share math does not add up with Collins and Diggs and Dell. I'll just take the least expensive guy, which is Dell, and ship it. So that's easy. Dell has the highest floor, the highest ceiling, is the least expensive. That is such an easy call, right? And then it's like, okay, the running back that had the most absurd ADP all year was Kyren Williams. That's a slam dunk. That's without exception or dispute. And now we have to say, well, who was the wide receiver with the most irrational ADP? What was a slam dunk Nico Collins, I think now is starting to be a horse race between Nico and Marv.
If he returns wide receiver 10 numbers on the year, that's great. But that's not why you draft players where you draft them. If you get a wide receiver 10 finish from somebody that you drafted as wide receiver 10, you've returned 0 value whatsoever, right? Like, you might as well have inserted draft pick A instead of the player themselves. My question is, can he actually get high enough to finish inside that top 5? I think so, but a lot has to break right for that to happen. It's not just Marvin Harrison is incredible, he will be top 5. That's not how this works. I would love for it to be that, but that's not how this works. There's so much around him that has to work out for him to be in the top 5. You have to have a high enough pass volume offense. You need your quarterback to stay healthy. You need your offensive coordinator to scheme you targets on specific plays. You need the touchdown upside. You need all of this.
It's not happening. And you're an Ohio State fan.
Yeah, I love him.
Just full disclosure, you're an Ohio State fan, and you're like, this doesn't even add up, man. It doesn't even add up. And a lot of you have your drafts.
He signed this for me last year. That's my guy.
And yet it doesn't add up.
It just doesn't make sense. This is purely as a fantasy asset. I think he will walk in and potentially be a top 10 receiver in the league. That does not mean that he will return top 10 fantasy production. That's not how this works.
And I'm not saying don't draft him. I'm not saying don't draft him any more than I'm not drafting Nico Collins. I say put 3 or 4% down of your best ball portfolio on Marv. Make sure you get a little bit of Marv. You're going to dabble on Marv, dabble on Nico, because if these guys are the undisputed number 1 options on their team, those are going to be players that can hurt you, that can beat you.
Yeah.
The probability of this happening is very low for both of those players.
Yeah.
which is why I'm way underweight on best ball in best ball. And then also, if it's not best ball, I don't have enough teams in my non-best ball portfolio to justify drafting them, because I'm not out here drafting. If I'm Chad Schroeder and I'm drafting hundreds of teams, then I'm going to have a bunch of Harrison, of course. But with me, I'm just like, there's a few guys like I'm just not doing it. I'm not doing it.
I mean, Dynasty wide receiver 5. Last time I checked, that's again, you're buying into a high market and you're hoping to beat someone that's already at what amounts to the top of their projection. If you're taking someone as Dynasty wide receiver 5, that's the price that you're paying. What you are functionally saying, and I say this about draft picks that NFL teams make all the time, what you were saying is you think he will at some point be a top 4 receiver in the league. Fantasy-wise, you think that at some point he will earn you more fantasy points than all but 2, 3, 4 receivers in the game. That is what you are betting on. Do I think that's likely long-term? Will he have one of those seasons, 2 of those seasons, a few of those seasons? Yeah, probably. But to ask him to do that in year 1 to pay off that value is crazy. For me, yeah, there are obviously going to be leagues where I have him, but it's not going to be a heavyweight portfolio. And I love Marvin Harrison Jr. Like I want him on my team any day of the week, real life football. But for fantasy, totally different game.
I don't love him. And you love him, and we agree that this is pretty much silliness, which is happening, and we'll see what happens. We're gonna all see what happens together. I hope the best, right? I hope that he does great and he's an exciting talent. But there is this possibility that all of his preparation for the 2024 season, because remember, he's been mentally preparing for the 2024 season from the start of the process, because that was the only line he ever said to anybody.
Yeah.
So the fact that he has so dialed into being mentally ready for the 2024 season, he's sort of set himself up. He better deliver. You got to understand, Anand, he is so mentally dialed in. Ever since the combine and all these team interviews, his only focus is what he would tell the teams, every team. My only focus is the 2024 season. I'm not talking about the past. I'm not talking about the present. I'm only talking about the 20. And if he can't deliver, I mean, think about what that says about his mental preparation. If you've been spending all this time preparing mentally for the 2024 season and then you faceplant, that's a bad sign.
He'll be fine.
Your team really wants you to succeed. I think he will have a season or two. There's I mean, there is a doubt. There have been players drafted at his spot with his profile that have not delivered for fantasy. It's very low probability, but I think that it's a possibility. He is going to have a 1,000-yard season at some point.
Yeah, I mean,
we talked about, by the way, what a bust is, right? Remember I was reading the 2020 wide receivers?
Yeah.
And in the chat, someone brought up, well, you forgot Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool was in there, but guess what, Anand? Chase Claypool was not a bust. Chase Claypool had like a 1,300-yard season with like 15 touchdowns. I'm exaggerating, but he had a huge season.
He did.
And we thought he was Calvin Johnson. I mean, I didn't, but people on this program that I had on certainly did. Yeah. And we argued about it, right? Yeah. And then now the idea that a guy had that kind of season and he is unanimously considered just an outright bust is really funny, because he was he was drafted right after KJ Hamler, but I couldn't call, I was thinking in good faith. I'm like, I can't call him a bust because he's not technically.
No.
But he does actually sit in that final chair of the types of busts that you find at the late first, early second. You have to remember there's that size speed specimen guy, the 6'4" guy that runs the 4.3. That guy also busts. Remember Stephen Hill? So there's a whole bunch of that archetype out there in terms of bust archetype. You have the KJ Hamler bust archetype. You have the Chase Claypool bust archetype. You have the Big 12 Jalen Reagor bust archetype. There's something for everybody, man, in that 2020 wide receiver class.
There's one that I go back to every now and then. It's always really funny to me. You remember Matt Jones, the QB from Arkansas,
Sure,
wide receiver?
Big time.
People fall in love. Again, there's a combine darling every single year. Someone falls in love. Look at what they did at the combine, right? And and you know, it's one of our favorite events to attend. Obviously, I've been several times, and Indy's a great time. Strongly recommend if you're young in this profession and want to meet some people and do some things. The Senior Bowl and the Combine are the two that I give out every year. But Matt, before we get out of here, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire as you did to me last year. Who's your pick to win the Super Bowl this year? Who are you taking and why?
We're really doing this?
We're doing this.
We're really doing this? Oh, man.
If you take mine, I'm going to be pissed.
You have a good one?
Yeah, I do.
I don't have a good one. I want it to be the Cowboys very badly. I think Jerry Jones is in the twilight of he's been, pasted together now as a human, right? He's still walking around. We still have Jerry. Like, we have Jerry and his ability to have a press conference for a couple more years, right? Dak Prescott, this offensive line hopefully will stay healthy. They have CeeDee Lamb leading the league in targets. They have this defense now, which is one of the best defenses that Dallas has ever had. If they can maintain continuity on that offensive line, having saved all this money on running back and investing it in other places, and then having that blueprint, right? Technically, that's what the Chiefs have been doing too, by the way, because Pacheco was a seventh rounder, right? So in spite of, I think, Jerry's better instincts, this team has been incredibly well crafted. And I think that every year they run into some buzzsaw team, whether it's the Packers or whatever it is in the playoffs. The Packers normally have their number, and I think Packers would be a fun choice too. I also think Atlanta's a fun choice. There's some fun choices out there, but I'm going to go maximum fun. America's team. How about them Cowboys?
Love it. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this, but I think it's Lions over Bengals. Ooh. I think this
all
is
cats.
All cats. This is
all cats.
I think that people have forgotten just how good Cincinnati is. And every year there's some team that every writer in America tries to drum up as this is the team that's going to beat Kansas City this year. There's only one team that keeps doing it, and it's Cincinnati. So give me the Bengals, give me the Lions, and I just think that's good. In that matchup, the Lions just have a little bit more juice than the Bengals do down in New Orleans. So give me Detroit. Our full rebuild 3 years later after starting this show, Detroit, Motown gets their Super Bowl, and they host a parade down the streets that we were in, 4 months ago?
I love Detroit in the NFC Conference Finals, and I think that they're going to make a big run, and I think that something's going to happen. We talked about this earlier. I think something's going to happen to derail San Francisco, unfortunately. They've just been too lucky with injuries and continuity the last few years. I think that will run out. Eventually, it always does. So I think they've run pure, and I think that the team that's been set up for success the best in the last 5 years is absolutely Detroit. And so that's what this show is all about. How do you build a team the right way? And it's exciting when you see Dallas just changing their entire DNA for how they approach and their whole approach to building a team. And then Detroit, same thing. Just starting from the studs, stripping it down to the studs and building it brick by brick. That was even more impressive than what they did in Dallas. So for those two teams to face off, and if it's not the Cowboys, maybe the Eagles against the Lions, right? As I know the Cowboys a little fringier of a selection, and then with Howie Roseman and he is the metronome of GMs. Just, if you're going to pick a guy that's going to make the right decision in any given play, any given move, it's going to be Howie Roseman. So seeing those characters and those architectures of teams make it all the way would just thrill me. It would be such a thrill. And then in the AFC, I love the Bengals. I think that's a great pick. And I would stay in the AFC North. I just think this is the year, man, for Baltimore.
Yeah.
I think this is the year. I think that you look at what they've done when they had the capstone of a Derrick Henry. Yes, from an analytics standpoint, it doesn't move the needle. But from a football standpoint, from a narrative standpoint, it just feels like they've been investing so often. Every pick they have that's in the top 100, odds are it's going to be a defender. And they make an exception here and there with the Zay Flowers, and it hits typically. That is one of the best front offices just in terms of from one decision to the next. Draft picks, free agents, they don't make mistakes. That is like the steadiest franchise in all of football. And then for everything to come together, Lamar in his prime, second-year Flowers, Mark Andrews still in his prime, now Derrick Henry, what this offense can do with what we know is a big-time playmaking defense, I think that would be super cool to see the Ravens come out of the AFC. So, yeah, I think I'll go Cowboys-Ravens for my that's a fun Super Bowl, right?
Love it.
That's pretty
Very
fun.
Super Bowl.
I think it's going to be a good Super Bowl. And also, shout out to Singuista. Singuista in the chat gave a truly lovely message to us, talking about how he has some drafts. He's been using our draft kit, PlayerProfiler.com's world famous draft kit. I participate in. I have a bunch of analysis in there. So does Anand. Theo was incredible. It's really Theo's draft kit. It's really what it is. But it really complements. His comment was just marveling at how the draft kit complements the analysis and how there's certainly some chalk picks in the draft kit that you're going to see. And then based on the analysis from these podcasts, you may decide here and there I can pivot, but the shows provide contextual value to the draft kit and vice versa. They work together, the streams and the podcasts with the online tools that we have to help you dominate your fantasy leagues. And now is the time. This is fantasy season. This is by far and away the biggest week for fantasy football. And on behalf of Anand Nanduri, I am the Podfather, and I wish you all the best of luck. From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to PlayerProfiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.